Hey guys, Chris from Propel here, and today we're going to be talking about the newly released Riese Müller Nevo 3. This bike just arrived in my shop yesterday, and we built it up right away to bring this review to you, and I'm really excited to show you. I realize I say excited a lot. I'm going to try not to say excited too much in this video, but I'll probably do it anyway. Now, when we first heard about this, I made an early release video of this bike, and you might have checked it out. But this one we're going to go a little bit more in detail and be able to show you some of the finer details of this new bike. So this is the Nevo 3, really cool. We had the previous Nevo, which had the external battery. Then we went to the Nevo GT, which had the internal battery, but the same generation 2 motor. And then this one has the integrated battery, but updated motor and some other updates as well, which we'll go into. So before I get into what makes the Nevo 3 different than the Nevo GT and the other previous versions of the Nevo, I'd really like to talk about what makes the Nevo on its own special. So the Nevo is identifiably different from the other models of Riese Müller in that it's a low step frame with a hardtail, so no rear suspension. They do have another model that does have rear suspension with the low step frame, and that's called the Homage. Now, if you wanted this bike but in a standard diamond frame, you'd be looking at the Charger, or now called the Charger 3, which has kind of the same features as this bike. And then the full suspension version of the Charger 3 is called the Delight. And those bikes are also available in dual battery versions, which you can add the battery onto the bike as you can with this Nevo 3, as well as have 2 integrated batteries, and that'd be the Supercharger 2 or the Super Delight. I just talked about most of the lineup of Riese Müller, but I think it's good to have a good idea of where the Nevo 3 fits and why this bike actually happens to be one of the most popular bikes in the Riese Müller lineup. It's just very versatile, really easy to get on and off of, and it's largely because of this low step frame. But even though it has a low step frame and what some might previously considered a girl's bike, it's a unisex frame, it's made for all different riders, and it's made to handle all sorts of different terrain as well. So that's the gist of the Nevo. That's kind of what makes it special and differentiates it from some of those other models. But what makes the Nevo 3 a little bit different from the previous version is a couple of different things. So the most notable change is the motor. So they went from the Generation 2 Bosch motor, which was found on the Nevo and the Nevo GT, and now they have the Generation 4 motor. The motor's a little bit smaller, more powerful, and recently they just updated the torque to go up to 85 Newton meters, which is pretty significant. And so this bike is very powerful and it's very capable. So it's available with 2 different motors. It has the Cx motor or the high-speed motor. Both of those are Generation 4. Both of them have 85 Newton meters of torque. And the hardware is very similar, but it's not exactly the same. Basically, the Cx motor is meant to have more low-end power, and the high-speed motor is meant to have more top-end power. So that might be part of your consideration when you're choosing between the two, but previously, some people chose between the two and might opt more for the Cx in very hilly areas. But most people find it's got plenty of power no matter what drivetrain you choose, or motor for that matter. Some other notable changes include the battery. So historically, the original Nevo had an external power pack. Then we went to the Nevo GT, which went to the internal Powertube battery. Both of those were 500 watt hour, and you had the option of the second external power pack on the Nevo GT. This one has some different options. You can do an internal 500 watt hour, Powertube 625 watt hour, depending on the size. And then you can do an external 500 watt hour rear frame mounted power pack. And that's a battery, some other details. They now have water bottle holders, really big deal. A lot of people were looking forward to that. It doesn't come standard with water bottles, but we have them if you need them. So let us know. And then you can also use the front carrier. Basically what they're doing is moving towards this standard system where you can have the front carrier on there. You can have this new updated cockpit system, which includes an adjustable stem. Right now, this is kind of in a more forward position, a bit more sporty, but you can easily adjust this and angle it backwards, be in a more upright sitting position. And that's kind of the gist of most of the major frame changes or changes to the Nevo3 overall. So I want to get into more detailed specs, and then we'll cover the rest of those details in more depth. The Nevo3 is a really versatile bike, and that's one of the things I really love about the Nevo and really Riese Müller bikes in general. Because of the wide tires, you can really handle all sorts of different terrain, whether you're riding on more of a paved surface or you want to go on dirt roads, ride a little off-road, etc. These things can really handle it. Now, the Nevo, though, in particular, it's really great because of the low step, really easy to get on and off of. We find a lot of people, maybe they're getting a little bit older, maybe they have some knee or hip issues, or they just don't want to fuss with swinging their leg around the bike. And I can't blame them. I mean, I really appreciate having that ease of just slipping my leg right through the bike, getting on and off of, and especially in urban environments where I find myself stopping and going more often, it's really convenient to have that low step. And historically, one of the challenges with low step bikes is that you compromise the rigidity of the frame. Now, not having that top tube, it can be challenging, but the way that they manufacture this, and you could look at it, you know, and you can usually just tell that this thing, they didn't really skimp on frame material. Now that does add to the weight a little bit, but when you ride it, you don't really feel that. I mean, it just feels solid underneath you, and you just feel like you can really handle whatever you throw at it. Whether you're going faster on the high-speed version or you're going downhill, this thing really delivers, and it's one of the most common recommendations in the shop. So this bike is the Nevo GT Vario, and it's set up with the standard GT tires, which are the Supermoto X 27.5 by 2.4. It's a pretty wide tire. I mean, look at that thing. It's not what's considered a fat tire, but it's definitely pretty beefy. It's not as ideal for the real loose stuff off-road, but it's plenty for dirt roads, you know, light trails, that sort of thing. If you want to go with a more aggressive tire, you can opt for the GX option, and then you'll get the Rock Razor tires, which is a 27.5 by 2.35, just slightly narrower, but you have a lot more tread on that tire, and it's going to be more capable in the loose stuff. But that tire does have a little bit less puncture protection, and it's not as efficient on road, so I'd really only consider that if you're doing a significant portion of your riding off-road. We also did a video about the GX option, which is part of that, and you might want to check that out if you want to learn more about that option and learn about, you know, the different changes that come along with that, like the pedals and saddle and grips. But getting back to the Supermoto X tires, they're very popular for a variety of different bikes. Riese Müller, this is kind of their standard in a lot of ways. They offer a lot of puncture protection, and they're a high volume tire. And you could run them at a little bit lower pressure, which can add to the comfort and add to the traction on the ground as well. This bike's set up with a 27.5-inch rim, 35 millimeters wide. It's got double wall aluminum, pretty heavy duty. It's a through axle, which is generally something you'll find on mountain bikes, but it's very fitting for this bike because it's just intended to just be very stout, be very capable, and be able to handle a very large payload as well, which I should mention. The standard is about 300 pounds, and then it goes up to 353 pounds when you opt for the GH version, which just changes a couple other details about the bike, like the seat post, saddle, and the pedals on the bike. So if you're a heavier rider, you might want to consider opting for that GH version. The fork on the bike is a Suntour Aion E45, and it's an air suspension fork, so you can set it up exactly to your body weight and, you know, how firm or soft you want to run with that. It does have a lockout on it as well, and, you know, really good equipment. Set up with 65 millimeter fenders up front. They're plastic, but they're reinforced with metal inside, so they're pretty stiff, and they have that nice kind of satin finish to them, which I appreciate. So since this is the Vario version, this one's set up with the Enviolo Rear Hub. Now this is a continually variable transmission, really easy to use, very low maintenance, and probably the most popular drivetrain for this bike, especially because you also get to couple it with a belt, which drops the maintenance level down quite a bit. You don't really have to worry about greasing it, and it's just about keeping it clean. This is also available with a couple other drivetrains as well. It's available with the standard derailleur and chain, which you might find on a traditional mountain bike, or it's available with the roll-off E14 that's electronically shifted, 14 speeds, really wide range of gears, and that's something maybe if you want something very special, the most efficient and the widest range, still while keeping that maintenance really low, the roll-off is a great option to go. But the Enviolo still tends to be one of the most popular there. Some other little things to call out back here while we're here. This is a little part is called a snubber, and basically the intention is just to keep the belt on there very firmly and have these adjustable dropouts. That's how you set the tension on the belt. And one thing that's interesting, we were kind of concerned, and we didn't really know if they were going to be able to keep this same design of what's called the upper chainstay while still going with that larger chainring that they have on the Generation 4 motor, but they pulled it off, and that's really no surprise because Riese Müller is always introducing these feats of engineering that would otherwise be impossible for most others. And I don't want to make too big of a deal about it, but I think it is a pretty big deal, and it's something I certainly appreciate. The idea that you don't have to have a split in the frame is really quite nice, and I think the aesthetics of it is really beautiful. Now this model doesn't have the HS at the end of the name, so it's going to come with the standard CX motor, but this thing isn't really standard by most people's terms. It's a very high torque motor. It's generally reserved for mountain bikes, but Riese Müller chose to spec this on this bike because they really want to put the best that they can make available, and that's kind of the way they build things. They just make the best bike they can make, and then they say this is what the price is. So this is the Bosch Generation 4 CX motor. I think they did a great job integrating this into the frame. I really love this little chain guard that they put, or belt guard I should say. It doesn't have a chain on it. I mean, although I guess certain models would, so I guess it depends on the model. We call it a chain guard or a belt guard. I don't know. Standard size chain ring, a little different than what you might have seen historically on the Nevo with that smaller chain ring. This motor no longer has that reduction gear in there. So a little bit different characteristics, but plenty of power, and it's really quite nice. But let's check out the other side of the motor. We can see it a little bit better, and we'll talk about how that works. This new Generation 4 motor has a couple of differences from the previous generation. It's using basically the same technology, the same type of sensors. It's got a torque sensor, a cadence sensor, and a speed sensor, sensing how fast you're going. And it's calculating all that information to deliver power using a technology called pedal assist. It just basically amplifies your input, but some of the ways in which it differs is a bit smaller, but they've also been able to make it a bit more powerful. They were able to make it smaller and more powerful by removing that reduction gear. So this is the CX one, but it's also available in the speed variety. Both of them have the same amount of torque. It's 85 Newton meters, and both of them, as I said before, use all the same sensors, 1,000 senses per second. Pretty advanced stuff. I should also mention that this frame is available in a couple different sizes. This particular one is a 47 centimeter, but it's also available in a 43 centimeter, which is the smallest size. That smaller size comes with a 26-inch wheel. The 47 centimeter comes with a 27.5-inch wheel, which is on this bike. It's also available in a 51 centimeter and a 56 centimeter. Both of those also come with that larger 27.5-inch wheel. And it's available in 3 different frame colors. So this is the lunar gray metallic. It's also available in a dynamic red metallic, as well as the pure white. So another exciting update for the Nevo3 is this larger battery. So now it's available with the integrated 625 watt-hour battery, which this one has, but it also comes standard with the 500 watt-hour battery. For many people, 500 watt-hour is just plenty. Now I should note, if you opt for the 43 centimeter, it's only available with the integrated 500 watt-hour battery. But if you want more range, you can add a rear rack battery of 500 watt hours, and that's available for all of the models, but the 625 watt hour upgrade is only available for the 47, 51, and 56 centimeter size frame. Now the Bosch system is very efficient, and on average I think most people see somewhere around 30 miles off of a single battery, but you can get upwards of 70 plus miles if you ride in the lower levels of assistance. But I can show you a little bit more on the display so you can tell how much range you can get out of the bike on a given assistance level. To charge the battery, you can charge it on the bike through this port here, which I really appreciate. They actually made this like custom little cover for it. This is not the standard Bosch cover, and it functions really well, so you can charge in there. But you can also charge it off the bike just by unlocking it. So you stick the key in, and this is an ABIS plus key. You can get additional locks for the bike keyed the same, and you unlock it here. You do have to push this tab to get it to come out all the way, because it just comes out part of the way. And then you can actually see on the underside here, this is where you can also charge the battery as well. So this is a 625 watt-hour battery. It's 36 volts, 16.7 amp hours. It's the largest battery that Bosch offers, and it's really plenty of power. And to turn the system on, we have the power button up here. Now this one has the Kiox display, but it comes standard with the Enviolo display. When you get the Kiox, you get this adjustable cockpit as well, which is really nice because you can adjust the bike to the exact ride position that you want. Right now it's set up in a bit more of a sporty position, but most people generally opt to be a little bit more upright and just angling this stem a little bit closer to you. Now this is the Kiox, which is a color display. It's relatively new for Bosch, but it's also available with the smartphone hub if you don't opt for the electronically shifted roll-off. But the Kiox is a great way to go, and there's actually a software update pending for the Kiox, which will give you a turn-by-turn navigation. But we'll get into that in another video, but you can see basically the information. You could see the time. You can see this. It says off. That says the assistance level. So if you wanted to actually turn the assistance on, because right now it would just ride like a normal bike. And by the way, really no resistance with this motor, which I appreciate. But if you turn the motor on, you can go into the first level of assistance, which is eco mode. As you see, I'm hitting this plus button here. And you can go Eco, Tour, Sport, and Turbo mode being the highest. Eco is about 60%, Tour is 140%, Sport mode, depending on how you have it set up, is about 240%, and Turbo mode is 340%, which is pretty significant. At that point, you have to put very little effort to get quite a bit out of the bike. But if you want to be more conservative, riding an Eco or Tour makes sense, and maybe you want to bump up to the higher assist levels as you go up a hill. Or some people just want to get to their destination as fast as they can, or they just want an exhilarating ride, or riding fast, and riding turbo, perfectly reasonable in that regard. Other details, you have the light here. Now usually this is switchable here, but by default these are locked on all the time, but you can make this switchable at the dealer if you wanted to. You have the battery percentage. This is on miles per hour, but you can set it to kilometers. And then you have this here, which is showing your speedometer. Right now the bike's not moving, so it's 0.0. And then this will show you the bike's power as well as your power. But we go into this a little bit more detailed in this Kiox display video. And you can check that out on our channel if you want to learn a little bit more about the Kiox display. But you can cycle through some of these different things. You can see the range. That's actually one of the things I wanted to show you, as I was talking about before. See, in eco mode, 68 miles, so 70 miles or so is pretty easy to achieve. And then if you go up to the top level of assist of turbo mode, so it's about 34 miles. Now if you add that 500 watt-hour second battery, you could nearly double that number. So even at the high level of assistance, you can go pretty far. Some other things, we got the trip distance, trip time, you got power and cadence, which is really nice to check out if you really want to focus on your fitness or focus on your efficiency. That's a nice detail to look at, average speed, max speed, and then some of these different panels. Now with this new update, you can update these screens as well, so you can show some different details depending on how you want to have it configured. You have a heart rate monitor. Now I should note this is not compatible with an Apple Watch, but it would work with any Ant Plus heart rate monitor. It doesn't run through a phone specifically, because this doesn't interface directly through the phone, although it does have an app that you're able to track a lot of your ride data and different things like that. Another detail, when you put in your information, you can see how many calories you're burned, and then you can get into the settings. But again, we have a video that goes into this a little bit more detail, so I don't want to waste too much time on this one, on that specifically. So that's the gist of the display. It is removable. As I said, you also have the smartphone hub available. So this display, it's set up like that. You have the smartphone hub and then the Enviolo display. The Enviolo display comes with a fixed stem, but it is a little bit more upright position by default. But this one is adjustable, so you can adjust it to whatever position you might like, which is really nice. And to shift the gears on the bike, it's really easy. You just twist it away from you to go into the lower gear, or you twist it towards you to go into a higher gear. And as you see, this little pictogram here changes. So the guy on the hill is in lower gear, and as you twist it, it goes flatter, and as you go into the higher gear. So really easy to use, and I find that this system works great for people that maybe are not so familiar with using gears or don't really want to fuss with them so much, and certainly appreciate that. You get these really nice ergonomic grips and a slightly swept back bar with a little bit of rise to it. So it gives you really nice positioning, and you have plenty of flexibility if you want to be more sporty or want to be more upright. Little bell on this one. The speed bike will come with a horn, and then as well as the high beam on the light. For the brakes on the bike, we have the Magura MT brakes, and it's a MT4 in the rear and MT5 in the front. They're hydraulic disc brakes, really powerful and nice 2-finger levers here. Now this is the standard 20-mile-an-hour version, which doesn't come with the electronic switches for brake lights, which you'll find on the high-speed bike. So the calipers up front are the Magura MT5s. They're quad piston brakes, really powerful, plenty of stopping power. They have quad piston in the front and dual piston with the Magura MT4s in the rear, which is plenty, because really actually you get most of your stopping power up front here. 180 millimeter rotors, front and rear. But this thing, it's got plenty of stopping power, which makes sense because you can get it in the high speed, but you can also, you know, with that CX motor, you can climb up some pretty large hills. So going down, you have plenty of control. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this review. I certainly enjoyed the brief time that I've got to spend in the saddle so far, but I'll definitely be riding it some more, as the Nevo's always been a favorite bike of mine. I think it's going to be really popular, and you know, with these new updates, I think it's going to be a really great option for many people. If you have any questions about this bike or just e-bikes in general, always feel free to reach out to us, or you know, leave a comment below if you have an experience. Maybe you've ridden the previous Nevo. Let us know what you think or what works for you, doesn't work, and we look forward to seeing you in a future video. Well, see you soon.